China's second largest property developer with $300 billion in outstanding liabilities. 2 weeks ago, media reports revealed it was having issues and wouldn't be able to cover some of its loan interest that it was about to fall due. So, anxious Chinese residents filled its headquarters demanding repayment. Many are now waiting to see if the Chinese Communist Party will try to bail it out to prevent a potential debt crisis, but there's no indication it will. So joining us to discuss the Evergrande debacle in China is Chief Economist at the Tressis Hedge Fund, Daniel Lacalle. Lacalle helps manage $6 billion of assets at Tressis. Daniel, pleasure to see you. Are you expecting a default here? And if you are, is there a risk of kind of global contagion like we're hearing?
I think that the risk of a default is almost inevitable because the situation of Evergrande has been of weakening its cash flow situation and its balance sheet since 2012. It's been reducing its official leverage, but its unofficial leverage, its total liabilities have been rising and rising dramatically. The other problem with Evergrande is that it's a company that has been using a strategy of running to stand still, adding more debt to refinance maturing debt, putting more liabilities with very, very weak cash flow generation. And that is a strategy that has been followed not just by this company, but by other property developers in China.
You think that kind of impact is enough? We will feel it here in the States or in Europe, etc., or?
I don't think it's going to be very significant in developed economies, but we cannot ignore, and I think that that's why emerging market banks or banks linked to emerging market financing have suffered in the stock market, is because China has played a very significant role in the financing of very questionable projects all over Latin America and frontier economies in Africa. Therefore, many of these economies that have relied on Chinese lending for very, very doubtful projects are going to see a credit crunch. So I would say that there is a risk of certainly impact on the exporting nations of developed economies that export a lot to China. Germany, for example, is a case in point. I think there is a risk of contagion into the banks that finance into emerging markets, and also those banks that have been very exposed to emerging economies and to China itself.
How big a risk is it to the Chinese regime there? They have a difficult choice on their hands, because even if they do let Evergrande default, it's not just the big investors who are going to get burned. I think something like 2 million Chinese residents have already paid a deposit for a home there that hasn't been built. Well, what happens from a political sense?
Chinese government, this is not an easy situation because it's caught between a rock and a hard place. If it, on the one hand, decides to bail out Evergrande, obviously it's going to generate a very significant risk of basically incentivizing higher risk from other companies, because if one looks at the worst performer and it's bailed out, then it's almost a free-for-all to continue to misbehave, isn't it? The second one is that if it doesn't, millions of people in China are going to suffer from two effects. One, you've just mentioned, the fact that many citizens have already paid advances for properties that will never be developed. Second, a lot of citizens in China are going to suffer the credit crunch of the banking system that will have to curb lending to households. So it's a very, very difficult situation. If it bails out Evergrande, it's going to get into a worse situation in a couple of years' time. And if it doesn't bail it out, we find that there's likely to be a very significant credit crunch and very severe impact on those citizens that have already paid in advance to reserve some of these properties.
Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, leave your comments below, and keep defending freedom. Thank you very much.